Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Dead Malls, your one home for the best abandoned mall tours and everything history related. And welcome everyone to the Season 6 finale. Our great conclusion to this journey has finally come, and guys, I am so excited to show you what's in store for tonight. After being stuck in the video vault for close to 2 years, it's finally time for me to share my footage of Century 3 Mall. As the mall itself, as I'm releasing this in April 2025, is over halfway demolished and nowhere near resembles the state you're gonna see it in tonight's video. We successfully got in and out of this massive mall not once, but twice. A nighttime visit when lights were still on and before vandalism was really bad, and as you can see here, a daytime visit dating back to a rainy day in June of 2023. But before we get started with tonight's finale, I'd like to take a moment and shout out our winner who was able to successfully guess the final mall. Very nice job, BR Films, and congratulations to all my winners who were able to guess the next mall over the course of the season. This one's to you. Now, the nighttime visit before the mall got really trashed, we'll see later on, as it was a bit more rushed, hence the second visit. And that be where our story begins. As the rain fell hard that day, we ventured across the abandoned parking lot, cratered to hell, and found a broken down door into what would become one of the most surreal experiences of my life.
It's all glass. Oh yeah, this is just like Westland.
Hello?
The night footage, which features some pretty creepy and spooky sights, will come later on, don't you worry. But first, we need to see Century 3 in the daytime. So as we walk through the old abandoned Dick's Sporting Goods, get comfy, get your popcorn, and put on your mold masks. Let me tell you the story of this 3-level nightmare, and how it came to become, for a time, the largest abandoned shopping mall in America. It wasn't always like this. If you can believe it, thousands of shoppers would have called these courts their third space. Beautiful fountains and colors would fill the atmosphere, and if we want to find out how Century 3 Mall became a literal hellscape, we need to rewind the tape over 60 years. Our story unironically begins on a pile of sludge. Lava, or slag to be more specific. You see, Pittsburgh is a city well known for its manufacturing of steel and iron. The nearby steel factories owned by the US Steel Corporation would produce this steel, but also a pesky byproduct of molten sludge known as slag. This slag would be shipped out on trains, days or nights didn't matter, and would be dumped down a man-made mountain known as Brown's Dump. Located in West Mifflin, a southern suburb of the city, locals in the area would reportedly see trains coming and going constantly, dumping the lava-like material which would glow a bright red throughout most nights. Spectators would even set up chairs far and wide to see the spectacle. The slag, once dumped off the bucket cars, would then burn down the mountain slowly until it was cooled and hardened. This process would go on for decades, with an estimated 70 million tons of slag dumped on the site. But by 1969, U.S. Steel had discontinued this program, and would begin to sell the land of Brown's Dump off to realtors. Soon brands like Murphy's Mart would come in to call it home, and U.S. Steel was so pleased with how the land was being sold up that by 1972, rumors began to spread that they were in talks with mall developers to build a super mall on the site. These were just rumors, of course, but could it be possible? Could the residents of West Mifflin get their very own mall? Well, soon enough, an announcement would come. As we begin our adventure through Century 3 and we make our way towards the old abandoned center court, you too can be taken aback by the immense and massive scale of this place. The giant atriums, which stretched off in seemingly infinite directions, made me feel so small and almost helpless in a way. It's hard to describe it, but the scale of this abandoned mall, where anything could be lurking in those shadows, made me feel like I was almost trapped inside, and the further our curiosity led us in, the more the feeling began to linger.
Oh, listen to the rain. Wow. Yeah. It's much worse. God, it's been trashed. That's so cool. The ceiling is like completely falling apart.
Somebody fell through the roof.
Yeah, you're right. Jesus, I can't even imagine what that was like. This is where it happened, right here. In the Macy's.
In 1976, U.S. Steel would announce that they had partnered with the Edward J.D. Bartolo Corporation to build a massive $100 million multi-level mega mall on the site of the dump. A mall which, once completed, would become the largest mall in the tri-state area. Now, contrary to popular belief, but Century 3 was not one of the largest malls in the world when it was around, as it was massively dwarfed by other DeBartolo malls like Randall Park and Taubman malls, which were all much larger. Though Century 3 was still massive in scale in its own way. By January of '78, zoning permits were in order, and shortly thereafter, ground would be broken. Construction workers would race around the clock to beat their opening deadline, which was as early as the next year of 1979. Interestingly, jackhammering of the slag pile revealed some strange finds, including an entire bucket from one of the old train cars which had been buried long ago and was actually put back on display at one of the mall's entrances later on, iron buttons from the cars themselves, as well as an entire abandoned coal mine hidden beneath the site. Construction workers would have to pump this old coal mine full of concrete to prevent ground fissures and future instability when it came to having an entire shopping mall built atop it. Reportedly, more concrete was actually used to pump the mines full than was used to build the entire mall itself. As 78 became 79, construction crews raced to finish the mall, which would open in 2 phases. With opening of the first phase nearing, future patrons and eager residents waited for their chance to see something truly breathtaking.
It's coming from in there. What is going on in here? Probably shouldn't have. What the fuck?
DeBartolo was well known to be an eccentric mall developer, notorious for pushing the boundaries of what a mall could really be, and he would not disappoint here. On Thursday, October 25th, 1979, thousands from all over the tri-state area packed around the half-completed parking lot to see DeBartolo himself, Richard Caligari, mayor of Pittsburgh, and the Pittsburgh Pirates parrot open the mall, with the mascot using his beak to cut the red ribbons. And what residents found was a mall of the future, Century 3 Mall, getting its name from the recently celebrated American bicentennial as a transition from the 2nd century of USA to the 3rd, looking ahead with a name solidifying that this was the mall for the new age, featuring 75 stores upon opening and a wall splitting the mall from its next phase, which was still being constructed. Opening anchors included a massive 2-story JCPenney and a 2-story Kaufmann's, which was the company's 4th store and first mall-type store. The mall itself, in typical DeBartolo fashion, straddled the lines between what was fiction and what was reality. It's really sad that there was so much negative and hateful graffiti covering surfaces, because in some abandoned malls, and I'm sure in some places of C3, you can have some really neat art. But like Jamestown, C3 is covered in crazy art, and just so destroyed, with portions of the second level itself literally splitting apart with cracks apparent on the floors and walls. There was something very apocalyptic to it all, so eerie and foreboding, seeing this giant ode to the good old days of capitalism rotting away, and now becoming destroyed by people that same system would have once worked perfectly for. It's hard, impossible really, to imagine that these same halls as the ones you're gonna see throughout the colorful, historic photos in this video. But just know, yes, this was once the same mall as these photos, as in its time, Century 3 was the mall of the future. By the way, let's get to that. The mall itself featured much of the same look you see today, but with a few notable additions which would be stripped out over the years. The skylights you see today used to not be there. The ceilings instead were coated in jutting angles, crossbeams, and supports, and doused with a healthy amount of mirrored lights. The mall in general was an architectural anomaly, still featuring the same brutalist designs you see today. DeBartolo had a way with his malls where he always seemed to push the limits of what was physically possible, and Century 3 would be no different, including fountains, full-size trees, ramps, red-carpeted conversation pits, halogen bulb street lamps, a beautiful and massive art sculpture called Pittsburgh Reflections, created by local artist Douglas Pickering, and at the center of it all, a beautiful halogen bulb-lined elevator, which took its shoppers to and fro the two levels of the expanse. But if this all sounds great, it was just the beginning, as with the second phase came so much more. I found it kind of humorous how you could still see these sandbags from the good old days of JCPenney back when the mall was closed, but JCPenney was still hanging on as this last holdout. And the water damage inside the mall was so bad that they literally piled sandbags around the store to hopefully protect it. What good that did them, like they were preparing for a hurricane or something. Nowadays, that obviously does them little, as the bags were strewn around the court and ripped apart, leading to that really fun sensation of sand in your shoes. On Wednesday, March 12, 1980, the second phase of Century 3 Mall would fully open, completing the modern layout. Attending the opening ceremony to cut the red ribbon included members of the Pittsburgh Steelers and Penguins, as well as cartoon characters Scooby-Doo, Huckleberry Hound, and Yogi Bear. The layout of the mall, which was gargantuan, was an understatement, as the addition added 46 new stores, an additional third level in the back, a food court, and 3 new anchor stores, those being Chicago-based Sears and Montgomery Ward, as well as a 2-level Indiana-based Gimbel's department store. These new anchors now brought them all up to a total of 5 anchor stores, not to mention the exterior parking deck, which wrapped around the entirety of the backside of the mall. A bit excessive, yes, but DeBartolo was in high hopes that it would all fill up quickly, and in the preceding years, Century 3 Mall would prove itself a massive success, filling up with over 200 inline stores and 35 eateries, those of which including stores like Sam Goody, KB Toys, Suncoast, Walden Books, The Limited, Hickory Farms, Father and Sons, Spencer Gifts, and the Baker Shoes, to name just a few. In the 3-level area known as the Courtyard, shoppers could be bedazzled in the sheer size of the towering brutalist architecture. Bare stone, concrete, and bricks all called the small home. Red carpeted ramps made their ways to either Sears or Montgomery Wards, and just below lie one of Century 3's hidden treasures. Known as Old Pittsburgh, this area consisted of bare cobblestone walkways, which weaved on a lower level between a clock shop and a coffee shop, all of course adorned in tropical plants, small light posts, and dazzling fountains, which glowed different colors as they followed the ramps and planters around. And how could I forget the new 19-bay food court, which would open with such delicacies in its wood-clad court such as corn dog on a stick, Tater Junction, Charlie Chan, Chick-fil-A, Orange Julius, the Original Cookie Company, and the Great Hot Dog Experience. Century 3 Mall in its early years made itself known that it was the mall in the Pittsburgh metro, a destination shopping sensation. Shoppers were coming not only from the tri-state area, but as far away as Maryland to see this mall. In its golden years packed each day, it seemed like Century 3 Mall was almost too big to fail. But really, that's exactly where its troubles began. Now before we get back to the center court, I gotta show you all this creepy little entry hallway here, which I guess sort of just allured me into its dark cavernness. It suffers from the same thing Sandburg does, being skylightless and having its entrance boarded up long ago. It was pitch black down here, which is why I didn't really stick around too long, but I think there was an old restaurant off to the left there at one point. Does anybody know what that would have been back in the day? Also, what's up with the roof leaking blue liquid? Like, is that something we should be concerned about? Or is that just the natural color of a bleeding mall? I don't know. When being down on the first floor, it becomes pretty apparent that this is where the decay is the worst, as when it comes to rain and decay, everything sort of just drips down. So you got all of the trash, all of the broken ceiling tiles, the receipts and the paper, the trashed up trees, everything sort of collects down here on the first floor, and when the water and the rain come in, that's sort of where it can all reach a breaking point.
Vitamin world. Stripped of its vitamins.
Anybody up for a Chinese massage? There was something very sad and melancholic about this center court. It being so trashed, but those stars still hanging and ever shining. There was something very depressing about that. I don't know what it was, but it was depressing and oddly beautiful in a way. As soon as 1985, troubles began for Century 3. Montgomery Ward and their shifting and downsizing economy would close their massive anchor in December of '85. Pittsburgh-based Horns would take over the space later in '86, but this move began a serious problem in the mall. It was simply too big to fill. For as wide open as its concourses were, there just weren't enough shoppers. By '86, dropping numbers in foot traffic would shutter the nearby Cinema World theaters. Subsequently, Gimbels would begin facing problems of their own, downsizing their store to a clearance center, and then going through a lawsuit with the mall owners who claimed the discount Gimbels was not a true department store. The suit was eventually dropped, however, Gimbels was out of the game. The company-wide liquidation meant the closure of their anchor at C3, which would transpire in January of 1988. The Gimbel space was found to be too difficult to fill, so they would instead split it for two separate junior anchors. In 1993, both Marshalls and TJ Maxx would come in to call C3 home, with Marshalls above and TJ Maxx setting up shop down below. In 1988, DeBartolo would fully assume ownership of the mall over US Steel, and with every anchor spot filled, after a few bumps in the road, it seemed as though C3 would glide through the 90s with ease. But as troubled as the 80s were, the 90s is where the mall truly began to show its colors, in every sense of the word.
At least there's some bit of greenery left. Someone's drinking. Some tea. Okay. Payless, maybe?
Between the two variations of the center chord, which do you all think is the better version of Century 3? The star-bound palm tree chord of the 90s? Or the sculpture and red conversation pits of the late 70s? As a man who appreciates fine, colorful aesthetics myself, I clearly know my choice, but I guess some people enjoy the Simon remodel. What about you? Whilst the mall itself slid smoothly into the 90s with fresh blue carpets in the conversation pits and walkways, its steady amount of foot traffic slowly continued to dip. In August of 1994, Horns would become a Columbus-based Lazarus, and thankfully this name would stick. For a bit. However, inside the mall, it was really beginning to struggle by the late 90s. Name brands were abandoning portions of the less traveled third floor, and major portions of the courtyard area would be walled off, or just left dead. Marshalls wouldn't last long themselves, as their small half store would close in 1996, becoming a Wykes Furniture. By 1996, DeBartolo would merge with the Simon Property Group to become the Simon DeBartolo Group, a massive conglomerate with a huge portfolio of malls. That May, plans would be unveiled by Simon to remodel Century 3 Mall. At a cost of $8 million, work would begin immediately. Under the tagline, "Getting ready for a new century," the mall would remain open throughout construction, where the original planters, fountains, elevator, sculpture, conversation pit, and all of the flooring would sadly be ripped up for Century 3's new look, or current look, the blue carpets, stars, and potted palm trees, which would debut their looks in December of 1996.
Mechanics of the elevator. That's interesting. Is it still there? Oh. Yeah. Yep. Oh, that's so cool. It has all the original colors. The stars on the floor. That's cool. It smells weird in here.
More stores, more brands, more deals, all in one place. Shop smarter at Simon Malls.
Despite the renovations, store closures, and downsizing continued. By February of 1997, TJ Maxx would become the discount version TJ Maxx and More. And in October of 1999, Lazarus would also close, with the massive space being taken over once again, this time by Kaufmann's, who funny enough would move their furniture showroom into the anchor. Kaufmann's Furniture Gallery would officially open in 1999, but its weak addition to the lineup and the shrinking of the mall's prominence did little to help. That same year of '99, the newest competition would open just 5 miles away. Built on the site of an old U.S. steel plant, the Waterfront Outdoor Shopping Center would open, with dozens more modern offerings. It was also around this time that the newer big box competitors like Walmart, Sam's Club, Best Buy, and Lowe's all opened up right above Century 3 on the former slag mound. This whole area in the late 90s and early 2000s would become a massive retail draw, pulling away droves of shoppers who would have once shopped at C3. In fact, in aerials, we can see just how much the mall was struggling during this time, as vast stretches of the parking deck and parking lot itself were left empty and abandoned.
I thought I did too. I heard something coming from over there, but I think that's water.
It's pretty hard to tell what this area used to be. It's sad just how far gone this area is especially, but at one point this was all the most scenic and picturesque destination within the mall. The cobblestone you see on the ground is original, as this was once old Pittsburgh itself. In its later life, it's apparent that it later became some sort of a comic store, but the courtyard and this whole area of the mall itself especially is untouched, because Simon left a lot of the original looks and fixtures from 1980, including the original halogen street lamps, planters, and if you look closely, fountains, which in their later years were filled in with dirt. And that's always a pretty telling sign. It helps paint a picture of the dire cost-cutting measures that this place faced in its life.
Here's more comics. Holy, there's so many. Fallen Skies.
Fallen Skies was a good show. They turned it into a show on TNT.
Yeah, right here.
Welcome to the courtyard, where dozens of beautiful fountains once followed these ramped planters around, trees grew, and beautiful neon-lit stores prospered. Now, it's all just a moment in a photograph, a fading memory of a bygone time, a better time. Century 3 gets to hold the title of being the first mall that I've ever been to feature these absolutely abhorrent, disgusting, and telling signs of the times. This being the black mold-covered spiderwebs which covered the walls and ceilings above me and caked the inside of this old store, which would be the last place that I would ever go to inside of this mall. That sounds like some sort of respiratory-induced creature feature nightmare.
This whole store is filled with it. That's mold. Oh, that is so strong. Guys, I'm out here risking my life to make you this video. This was Montgomery Ward, and then they used it for the set of a movie for a little bit. What is that? Fake Walden Books. Imposter. At least I saw the actual one. See what the letters are. So visible. Oh. The fake bookshelves.
By 2000, Century 3 was really beginning to show its age. While the grand concourses and giant pillar atriums of DeBartolo's Mall were striking and awe-inspiring of their time, the modern day would not fare so well on the mall. Vacancies plagued the courtyard and third level, and white drywalls, a lot of which still visible during our visit, began to pop up, covering old stores from opening, and bringing vacancy in the property up to 20% by 2003. Back in the day when it first opened, electrical and heating costs were relatively minute. However, in the 90s, energy prices skyrocketed, and suddenly Simon was making little return off their giant shopping center. The mall's slowing economy mixed with the huge maintenance fees was a recipe for disaster. On February 1st, 2003, TJ Maxx and more would close its doors, and the space would be taken over by a Steve & Barry's. Wykes, right above them, would close their doors the following year, and the space would go through a major facelift, becoming Dick's Sporting Goods, which would open in 2004.
excited. Lights used to be on.
I want you to remember everything you see down here. The vandalized drywalls, the Sears with its lights off inside, the food court which used to have lights illuminating the way inside. Remember all of it, because when we jump back in time, you'll see C3 months prior, and it's just crazy how quickly it all went to hell.
Sprint stuff. And that's what their logo used to look like. That's cool. That's cool. Let me go up to the next level. Let's go to food court is.
I'm not a fan of most vandalism, but I will say, seeing the old food court chairs stuck into these drywalls of these old eateries, as if they were literally shot out of a cannon, was pretty cool. Whoever did this little chair piece, nice job. Even though they probably weren't even trying to make something thought-provoking, but still very cool. And if you look behind each of these drywalls, you can see all of these old eateries from the 80s, still retaining their tiles and original colors. This was so cool to see. Kaufmann's, after years of success and even a few additions to their store, would be emaciated as part of the Mays merger in July of 2005. By September of the following year, both Kaufmann's and the Kaufmann's Furniture Gallery would become Macy's and the Macy's Furniture Gallery, respectively, the latter of which to downgrade their operations solely to the ground level. In 2006, Simon would attempt to sell the struggling mall, which at the time was valued at around $128 million. However, little to no interest came Simon's way, and the floundering mall continued to languish. Century 3 would slug through the recession, losing several more of its once prominent name brands, with vacancies creeping into the mall's central areas and other courts by this time. A very telling sign of its impending doom was the closure and abandonment of the old parking deck access road, which was closed and blocked off as early as 2007. This access road would be left abandoned in the coming years, with weeds and foliage completely overtaking the road, a road which in itself would have once carried thousands of cars a day. In January of 2009, Steve & Barry's would go completely bankrupt, closing for the final time. The old lower-level gimbal space would never be reoccupied. That same year, Macy's would abandon the furniture gallery concept, closing their store on the east side of the mall, leaving the old Montgomery Ward building dark and empty. The space would never be reoccupied, and the fountains throughout the courtyard around this time would too be turned off and filled in with mulch to curb costs. By June of 2009, the mall was reassessed at just $58 million in value, a shocking 54% decrease from just 3 years prior. Right around this time, Century 3 Mall was listed as being one of the most endangered malls in the US, becoming a fixture of the dead mall scene for quite some time. Do you have any memories of this food court, from either DeBartolo's wood-clad days or Simon's newer, more colorful style of the 90s? Which restaurants and venues do you remember best and most fondest from here? Let me know down below. I'd love to hear them. It was really bizarre to see such a huge food court, most of which, as you can tell by the colored drywalls covering the stalls, were closed before the mall went dark entirely. No C3, you weren't fooling anyone with those colored drywalls. You can paint them a different color and try and spiffy up the mess, but remember that behind it all is just a mess. And in the 2010s, the mess would really become apparent, as the mall itself spiraled ever further. In August of 2011, Simon defaulted on their $78 million loan on the property, with Century 3 going into the hands of its lenders, Jones Lang LaSalle, who would manage the mall for a few years before selling it to Las Vegas-based mall owner scumlords Moonbeam Capital, who branded themselves at the time as this company who specialized in helping save dying malls. This was far from the truth, and Moonbeam's ugly and true intentions would soon come out. Their only addition would be the double-decker carousel in the center court, which would present itself in July of 2014. However, this was in vain, as Sears, one of the mall's last original names, would pull the plug, closing their massive 2-level store in December of 2014. The space would also never be reoccupied, and after Sears' departure, the 3rd level and most of the courtyard became almost entirely vacant, with vacancies spreading through the food court and into the center court area. The situation was unfolding quick, and Moonbeam, a similar company to Namdar or Kohan, did little to help, instead sitting on their rent and choking out several different tenants with higher prices. By the mid to late 2010s, ceiling water damage and decay was becoming apparent, especially towards the courtyard area. The old Macy's Furniture Gallery wing would be walled off around this time, and soon the 3rd floor itself would be closed off completely, as there were literally no brands left operating up there. Speaking of which, let's head up and check this place out.
The floor is so sticky and gross. I just want to gag. That is cool. That's a cool shot.
I wish I would have stuck around a little bit more and seen a bit more of the upper floor, but it was so moldy. Like, I can take a little bit of mold, but up there where the fire was, it was unbearably moldy. And the floor was covered in this weird, sticky green algae. I don't even know. It was disgusting. Century 3 post-abandonment was its own ecosystem. But that 3rd level, looking down on the courtyard, it really gives you just a bit of perspective into just how massive this mall was, and how in its state of abandonment, it literally feels like as close as we could come to seeing a real-life, post-apocalyptic America. Throughout 2015, it was becoming apparent C3 did not have long. While the small center court fountain continued to operate gallantly and stars hung patiently above, the stores all around them would begin to close, and popular YouTubers began to show their faces around the mall. The Century 3 Mall, for a few years, became one of the most popular dead malls. In its later life, patrons would come from far and wide to see its cavernous concourses, which stood as a reminder of the bygone and changing times. Security did not like the attention the mall was getting and would kick out anyone they saw with a camera, though some were able to sneak by and even into areas of the mall completely closed off, revealing that the third floor had been entirely abandoned, with ceiling water damage and water decay all over the floors and carpets. On January 6, 2016, Macy's would announce the closure of their struggling department store within the mall, beginning closing sales and vacating their massive space by the end of that spring, leaving the small Dick's Sporting Goods and JCPenney as the mall's last remaining anchors. 2016 and 2017 especially were very difficult years, as few remaining stores and pop-up brands limped along and closed their doors on the way. On July 1st, 2017, the final food court stall, Village Italian Pizza, would close their gate for good, leaving the entirety of the 20-bay food court abandoned.
That's depressing.
By April 2018, the final restaurant, Old Mexico, would close after a pipe burst, leaving the mall with no remaining eateries. By this point, the carousel had been dismantled and sold off, while the fountain was also left bone dry. Escalators all over the mall would be turned off just so that Moonbeam could save a little bit of cash and continue to string the mall along, whilst wringing it dry. That April, the old Montgomery Ward wing would be converted into a fake mall set for the filming of the Netflix show Mindhunter, but the rest of C3 was definitely showing its age and its impending closure. On January 1st, 2019, Life Uniforms, the final remaining name brand inline tenant, would close its doors. By 2019, it was clear that this would be the final year of the mall. And on February 6th, 2019, notices would be posted by West Mifflin Fire Department upon entrances of the mall, deeming the structure to be unsafe and uninhabitable, after inspections found that there were numerous code violations present in the building, including no heating and a non-functioning sprinkler system. On February 12th, 2019, the mall would be delisted from Moonbeam's website, who would claim it was sold, and days later on the 15th, one of the final remaining stores in the structure, New Dimension Comics, would relocate to the waterfront. A day later on the 16th, and remaining tenants JCPenney and Dick's Sporting Goods were given 30-day eviction notices, as Moonbeam made it clear that they were abandoning this place. Century 3 Mall, after a roller coaster of a lifetime and a lifespan of just under 40 years, would close its doors for the final time, with Dick's Sporting Goods closing their doors shortly after in March of 2019. Leaving JCPenney, whom had sealed off mall access, as the final remaining tenant on site. That does it for the day tour, but let's flick the switch, literally turn out the lights, and go back a few months ago to the night footage, when this mall still had power, and before it had become trashed.
Feels like the only way to get in. The door's cracked. Who TP'd the place? This is the ultimate reveal. I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, when we first walked in and I saw that hanging mannequin, I thought to myself for a second, did I stumble in on a horrifying suicide scene? Thankfully for my sanity and my mental state, it was not that traumatizing, but it was still pretty creepy. This entire mall at nighttime was so creepy. After the mall had closed, Moonbeam announced that the site would be redeveloped into a new outdoor lifestyle center in 2020, containing new housing, outdoor retail, and offices, with JCPenney to remain open while the rest of the mall would be demolished. However, as 2020 came around, these plans never materialized, and instead the mall would be boarded up and abandoned. The final and original tenant to the structure would close their doors for the final time on Saturday, October 26, 2020, leaving the entire mall abandoned. The site still running power would remain in limbo for several years.
All the glass has been smashed. It's still in good condition. Cool, right?
I'd like to imagine this song as if it were playing over the food court speakers itself, and you're going to see the food court at nighttime here in just a second. Before it was too terribly decayed and vandalized, and it still kind of felt like this vaporwave album cover in a way.
The food court. Wow. Steak. All these food places closed. There's water all over the ground.
By mid to late 2022, the well-known abandoned mall was beginning to get vandalized, as people were finding ways in, and Moonbeam, who did still own the property, would completely drop security and maintenance by 2022. Windows were smashed up, graffiti and tags became ever prevalent throughout, and receipt paper was tossed around like confetti, strung from the ceilings in various places. This was right around our first visit, the night footage you're seeing now, just before it would get really bad. Through early 2023, with several big creators posting the mall, vandalism was getting much worse, and decay was becoming apparent. On April 11th, 2023, a fire broke out on the third level portion, right above the food court. The fire, caused by suspected arson, was eventually contained, though it destroyed a portion of the roof and made public officials very aware of the current state of the quickly deteriorating building. The power would fully be cut to the structure, and shortly after barricades went up, blocking off the mall's parking lot. However, these moves would not stop individuals from entering the mall, which was still extremely easy to access. Due to its mammoth size, it was nearly impossible to keep every door secure. On June 3rd, 2023, a teen who had accessed the roof fell through the old Macy's and was placed under critical condition with a punctured lung and multiple broken vertebrae. This incident was the straw that broke the camel's back, as now the city was coming in moonbeam from every side. Condemnation hearings would be held, and in July of 2023, shortly after the day visit, City Council voted 6-0 to completely condemn the structure. These moves and constant pokes at Moonbeam had people hopeful that something would be done. But of course, little happened. By late 2023, early 2024, and the mall was still sitting abandoned, falling apart and looking way worse than it did for me. On January 30th, 2024, the Allegheny County District Attorney filed criminal nuisance charges against Moonbeam, calling the mall a monument to blight. The court planned to seize the mall within 60 to 90 days, with demolition of the once prominent mall to begin immediately.
What was that? GameStop? Oh yeah, GameStop.
And now the best part, the part you've all been waiting for. The center court with the dangling stars at nighttime. Before it was covered in receipt paper and garbage, and it still looked kind of nice. Like I said at the beginning, I wish I would have filmed more while we were here at night, but we were all pretty creeped out, sleep deprivated from days of driving, and trying to stick together. As you gotta remember, this was our first time seeing the mall, so we were all constantly awestruck by its size and never-ending sprawling layout. Also, check out this amazing mirrored escalator cord. Back before it became too vandalized and destroyed, and still looked like some sort of Dan Mason album cover or something. The city of West Mifflin would acquire the mall from Moonbeam, putting forth their own funds for demo. After months of asbestos abatement in early 2024, demolition would officially begin on March 26, 2024, beginning with the rear parking deck. Over the course of 2024, demolition slowly got underway, as the mall was slowly gutted from the inside out and the parking deck raised. JCPenney was the first structure to fully be torn down by November, and soon crews made work on the main mall structure. As of April 2025, as you're seeing this video, JCPenney, Macy's, and all of the center court have been completely demolished.
Odd that it's like heating it up and like condensating the windows. It's crazy.
The main mall concourse is next up to be torn down, and after that, the old Gimbel's, Sears, and Montgomery Ward's buildings, after which there will be nothing left. Demolition is expected to be completed by 2026, so like most of the endings in these Dead Malls episodes, I guess we'll just have to wait and see how quickly C3 vanishes. After over 40 years, the structure has finally almost met its fate. But I don't think that should squander the memory of this amazing place. For decades, hundreds of thousands would have come to and fro these courts. Whether that be to buy clothes, work their job, get food, go on a date, or simply walk its halls, Century 3 was their place. And that's why I had to make this video, why I just had to get out here. Because the thought of all of these memories getting turned into a giant pile of scrap, which would then be hauled off to the dump, hurt. And I knew that I had to capture for those that still remember this place, so that they can always have something to look back on, and remember the once great mall, that third space.
Are there people reliving their childhoods in here? What are these purple things in the room? And gumballs. So much paper. Someone got hands with the paper.
Folks, as we head out here due to the growing suspicion that there was someone else in there with us, I want to thank those of you that have stuck around for watching. I hope you enjoyed the 3-level behemoth just as much as me. As daunting as the task seemed, we got it done, and it's another that I can check off the bucket list. So thank you for watching what is now the longest video on my channel. And to those that stuck around and watched throughout 2024, I hope you enjoyed all of Season 6. The malls we saw, the adventures we went on, and the people and friends we met along the way. The adventures and stories to tell is why I do it all, and your continued support here on the channel allows me to continue to tell these stories. So thank you so much. At some point between the release of this video and Season 7, we should hit 20,000 subscribers, which is just insane. I remember back when Season 5 was wrapping and we got to 10K. To have doubled that is just insane. So, like I said already 100 times before, thank you. As for what's next, well, next week the Season 7 trailer will drop, so be sure to look out for that, and then Season 7, which should come out in early summer. But to all my Patreon members, and to those that join any paid tier, Season 7 Episode 1 will be releasing next Saturday as early access. So if that interests you, consider becoming a member. Anyways, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed my show, and until we meet again, have a lovely evening, and peace out guys, see you later.